In the last section, we talked about the purchase of a home, and I mentioned that that was likely the most expensive item that a person will purchase in their entire life. And in this section, we're going to talk about the purchase of automobiles, and that's likely the second most expensive item that a person purchases during their lifetime. Well, automobile expenses include the following: down payment, license fees, and sales taxes. And all of these could be expressed as a percent of the purchase price. And certainly the down payment is a percent of the purchase price. License fees are charged, by the way, by the state, and so is sales tax. But sometimes this is a fixed amount, and sometimes it's a percent of the purchase price. Sales tax is almost always a percent of the purchase price. And these amounts of money and the percents involved will change from state to state because they are state-generated fees. Well, let's take a couple of examples. A car costs $8,000 and the sales tax is 5%. How much tax is paid? Now, as has been the case many times before, there is a hidden operation here. And you see, we can't pay 5%. A percent is not a dollar amount. It's not written in dollars and cents. What we pay is some amount of money. We don't pay percents, you see. So really, this is saying if we were going to pay a sales tax of 5%, it is implied that it's 5% of some amount. And the implication here is that it's 5% of the purchase price or 5% of $8,000. So that's the calculation that we make. We take $8,000 multiplied by 5%, and we find that the amount of sales tax is $400. All right, here's one that involves several expenses in the purchase of an automobile, and the automobile at this time is actually a truck. A truck costs $12,000. The buyer makes a down payment of 10% and is charged 2% for license fees and 6% for sales tax. How much money does the buyer need to close the deal? How much does the buyer need to have in going to the closing for this purchase of the truck in order to take the truck home? Well, the problem looks a little complicated because there are percents all over the place and we have a number of things that need to be added together. The most important thing that I can teach you at this point in problems like this and so many other kinds of math problems is the skill of organization. And I encourage you strongly to amplify and think actively about that kind of skill. If you keep things organized, then mathematics is going to be a great deal easier than it would be otherwise. So with that in mind, let's go through and reread the problem. And part of the organization might be to simply underline the things that we want to add as expenses in closing this deal. The buyer makes a down payment of 10%. Down payment is one of the expenses and is charged 2% for license fees. License fees, that's another expense. 6% for sales tax, that's another one. Now we can see clearly that down payment, license fees, sales tax, all are expenses involved in the transaction. Now, when we go through the process of organizing the sum of all of these, we go to the side and we do something like this. We might first list the purchase price because after all of these percents are percents of that purchase price. So for reference, we might write it. Then we list all of the expenses: down payment, license fees, sales tax. And notice I've even listed the percents associated with each of these. Now, again, this is just one way of many right ways to organize the information, but you need to come up with some way that works for you to organize things in problems like this. All right, we might even also do this. We might say, well, this is a list of expenses. You see, something like that might help out. All right, let's make the calculations. The down payment is 10% of $12,000, and that's $1,200. The license fees are 2% of $12,000, and that's $240. The sales tax is 6% of $12,000, and that's $720. And these need to be added for a total of the expenses. And adding these, we get $2,160. And this is the total amount of money we need to bring to the closing of this sale in order to walk away with the truck. We might, in addition to all of what we've done, we might even call this a total. So we have a total expense figure of $2,160. We've already talked about the cost associated with purchasing a vehicle. Now let's talk about some of the ongoing expenses. Now those expenses would include a monthly payment, insurance, gasoline, and general maintenance. And there are a number of problems associated with each of these, actually. Here, let's take a few examples. A car loan of $6,000 is financed for 3 years at an annual interest rate of 8%. Find the monthly car payment. Well, monthly car payments are calculated in much the same way that house payments are calculated. That is, they are equal payments throughout the term of the loan. And each payment includes some amount for principal and some amount for interest. And the amount for principal and interest changes throughout the course of the payback period. But let's use the table to answer this question. Now, we have a loan of $6,000 and the interest rate is 8%. And remember, in the table, we have a correlation. We kind of have to look up in the table. This is a multiplication factor that we're looking up, and it's a factor that we use to multiply times 6,000. But when we look it up, we're looking at a percent along the top row, and along the left-hand column, we're looking at some amount of time. So we kind of correlate 3 years with 8%, and we see a correlation factor, and that correlation factor is a long-winded decimal. Now, we're going to take the $6,000 for the amount of the loan, and we're going to multiply by that multiplication factor, which we find to be, let's see, it's 0, 3, 1, 3, 3, 6, 4 in the back of the book. And when we multiply, we find that the monthly payments will be $188.02. So the idea is to look up the multiplication factor and multiply that by the amount of the loan. Here's another. An estimate of the cost of owning a compact car is 32 cents per mile. Using this estimate, find the cost to operate the car for 15,000 miles. Now, this kind of information, this information about owning a compact car cost 32 cents per mile, is found from a number of different resources. There are a number of companies that make studies of this kind of thing, the cost of different kinds of automobiles and trucks and their ages and all of that kind of thing. And it's kind of an important number to know before buying a car, because you kind of know what you're getting yourself into in terms of the ongoing expenses. Okay, let's figure out the ongoing expense for operating this particular compact car for 15,000 miles. Maybe that would be a year, or maybe a year and a quarter, something like that. But let's see. So we would take this 15,000 miles, and this is saying that it's costing 32 cents per mile, 32 cents for every mile. We have 15,000 miles. So we're going to just take 15,000 and multiply by the 32 cents per mile. And upon multiplying, we find the amount to be $4,800. So it's estimated that operating this compact car for 15,000 miles is going to cost $4,800. This one is similar to the previous problem. It says a family spent $1,400 on auto expenses during a period when the car was driven 12,000 miles. Find the cost per mile for expenses. Find the cost per mile for expenses. Now, this amount, this $1,400, probably doesn't even include the cost of gasoline. So it's just the cost of general maintenance, maybe includes insurance. But whatever. Let's make the calculation here. And to decide what we're going to do, how the calculation is to be made or what operation is to be performed, look at what we're calculating. We want to find the cost per mile. Now remember, the per idea implies division, so this is cost divided by miles. And we might even emphasize the idea like this: cost per mile, like this, and then fill in the information from above. The cost idea is the $1,400, and the number of miles is 12,000. And upon dividing, we find that this quotient is a very long decimal. It turns out to be 0.116666, and this continues on. And we would presumably round this to some dollar and cents figure, and it turns out to be, let's see, rounding off to the nearest penny, you see, we would make this one larger because that's a 6, and so it would end up being 12 cents a mile. So it costs 12 cents a mile to operate this compact car for 12,000 miles.